Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire. Ultimate victory lies within the grasp of the dreaded galactic Emperor Palpatine, as the tattered remnants of the rebel fleet desperately seek sanctuary and time to muster new allies. A grim Luke Skywalker, reeling from Darth Vader's revelation on the cloud city of Bespin, ponders his own destiny and that of the Rebel Alliance. Meanwhile, the search ensues for Han Solo, captive of the notorious bounty hunter Boba Fett. To deal a final blow to the rebellion, Palpatine has hatched a new plan of which even Lord Vader is unaware. To aid him, the Emperor has enlisted the services of the vast criminal underworld that lurks within the shadows of the Empire. Hello, space junkies, and welcome to What a Piece of Junk, episode 88. And you guess it, Shadows of the Empire is what we're going to be covering today. But before I get to that, we're going to introduce our host that will be accompanying me while we're piloting the Drunken Gungan. Scott's a little preoccupied, so that's why I've kind of started it today, because he is finishing up, getting ready to move. So it's just going to be me and his original Wookiee co-pilot, Nathan Miracle, the Gooey Chewy. Nathan, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. Excited to talk about some Shadows of the Empire. We've got a little bit of different perspectives on this multimedia event that Star Wars did back in the late 90s. And since Scott is frozen in carbonite for his move, we brought in a special knockoff version, discount Scott, kind of like Dash Rendar was kind of the discount Han Solo.
But he's good looking.
Oh, well, of course he is. So please welcome Kevin Raider Nerd Reitzel.
What's up, guys? How you doing? This is fun, man.
Yes,
I'm so excited about this. Derek, I was a little more than excited when you were asking if you wanted me to come on to do this.
Yeah, I figured. So, but before we get into that, space junkies, and before Kevin, myself, and Nathan get going on talking about all the cool stuff that Shadows of the Empire led into, as well as got us really, with that extended universe, we're going to go into a little bit of Star Wars news. All right, so let's talk a little Star Wars news. First off, we have a birthday celebration. And obviously, birthdays come around all the time for everyone in the Star Wars family, but this one's pretty monumental. Harrison Ford turned 80 years old this past week, guys. 80 years old.
Officially an octogenarian. Congratulations, Harrison Ford. Wow.
It's funny. The older I get, it doesn't seem so old.
Next year I'll be half his age. So, but obviously, Harrison's still doing awesome in the movies. He's wrapping up Indiana Jones 5 there, and we're going to be getting that here pretty soon. So, pretty excited for that.
Quick question for you guys. What is your favorite underrated Harrison Ford movie? You can't say Star Wars. You can't say the Indiana Jones movies. Give me an underrated film that he's done that you like.
Well, I mean, obviously, Blade Runner is not underrated. So,
that's rated. Sorry, Nathan. The Fugitive is rated. Come on, man.
I don't know of anything that he's in that's not rated. He's just that good. Whatever he's in automatically becomes better because he's in it.
That's a good point.
Oh, I got one. The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, see,
no,
I thought about going that direction, but he's not in The Last Jedi.
Well said. I threw it on social media. I was a big fan of Hanover Street, a World War II era movie he did between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back. Really good movie.
I was gonna say, because Air Force One is great.
Yeah.
I mean, he's done The Fugitive, Patriot Games. I mean, come on, what do you Witness? As I'm scrolling through IMDb, because you kind of surprised us with that question, so I'm trying to think of anything.
In The Expendables? Or
Yeah,
maybe
he was in the third one. Yeah.
I didn't know they made a third one.
Yeah.
Okay, did you say it had to be a movie?
Yeah, I would just say movie, but I know
Okay.
you want to throw a TV show or something.
I was going to say he apparently guest starred in an episode of Kung Fu.
Wow, really? Wow.
Yes, 1974.
Nice,
So,
interesting.
Yeah, obviously he was popular by then, but
he keeps on chugging. And what's going to be great is he's going to be doing like the night the late night or talk show circuit when Indy 4 comes out, or 5 comes out.
Yeah, 5.
It'll be interesting to see him be old man.
Now I do have a fun bit of Harrison Ford trivia. Did you know that there are 2 Harrison Ford stars on the Walk of Fame? The first one is actually for a silent movie star. So Harrison Ford from Star Wars was not the first Harrison Ford to get a star on the Walk of Fame.
I did not know that. So the one that I've been kissing every time I go down there is not that one. I should probably look and see if it was like
double check. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You might be good, but you might not be good.
You got a 50-50 shot.
So, and it's also interesting to think, though, when we think about the original Star Wars of 1977, A New Hope, he was obviously a lot older than Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, right? I mean, he was kind of, both of them were kids in a sense, right? Or just
he was in his mid-30s, I think it was. Yeah,
early 30s.
Not in a sense, man. They were kids. Period.
Well, I mean, they were 18 and 19, so, and he was like 31, 32, I think.
Yeah, early 30s, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, because Mark Hamill's, I think, is 67 or 68, so not that far much older. So,
yep.
But yep. So, anyways, so wishing Harrison Ford a happy birthday. Also, we had I don't know if you guys watched it or not. So, with the Star Wars Celebration, there was the panel that talked about The Mandalorian, and they actually had a season 3 kind of teaser trailer. It really wasn't super anything official, but it obviously had, some unseen footage. And someone apparently recorded it and finally shared it, and it's been quote unquote leaked out there. Did you guys watch that clip that I posted, or have you seen it beforehand?
Yeah, I got to see the whole thing. Apparently they were making sure that people weren't filming it with their cell phones, but with as many people as were in the room, they couldn't get everybody. But yeah, it looks pretty good. Now, obviously, we're seeing a cell phone footage video of what was on the screen, so the quality of the video itself isn't that good, but the trailer seems great. What I really like about it is it's setting it up. We've talked about, does The Mandalorian refer to Din Djarin, or does it refer to Grogu being the Mandalorian? And I think season 3 is almost setting it up to ask, maybe this is the Mandalorian race. It's not just Grogu, not just Din, but it's covering the whole species, so to speak.
I started to watch it, and then I realized it was one of those sneaky phone camera things, and I'm looking over someone's shoulder, and I got about 10 seconds in, and I was out. I was like, nope. I don't want to watch it like this. I don't want to get spoiled anymore. I'll watch it at whatever they release later officially. I'll do that. But that's one of the reasons why I stopped pirating movies, because of the crap quality that was.
Well, don't worry. No big reveals yet, other than there are a ton of Mandalorians, which we anticipated because we know this is going to be the Battle of Mandalore, essentially, or how they're going to retake it, or however you want to the rebirth of Mandalore. So it definitely quite a lot in there. So
what I'm wondering here is if that recording was actually approved but done in a sneaky way, to get people a little more excited about what's to come. I'm just wondering if that was like a Lucasfilm going, hey, I want you to be over there with those guys. Just go ahead and leak it.
I think if they were doing that, they'd probably make it a little more high quality.
It looks like someone actually snuck a camera in there. So if they're going for authenticity, it worked. Authenticity.
I think I could see that. I mean, as a marketing stunt, right? I mean, it is, but at that point, it's just like just release it, right? Because I mean, they've had a few. You guys, for Star Wars Celebration, it's had a few weeks, so just let them, just release it at this point. So
I don't think they want to overshadow Andor, though. That's why I was wondering.
I could see that, but I mean, I'm excited for Andor. I mean, any Star Wars fan, and the fact that we know we're not getting it possibly at this point till Q1 of 2023, we got a lot of time to go still. So, but yeah, definitely seems exciting. So, all right. Speaking of Star Wars streaming service shows, we've got a little bit of conversation with more Ahsoka. So we obviously know we're getting the live action, but did you guys know that we will be getting a Ahsoka episode on the Jedi? What is it? Jedi Trials?
Tales of the Jedi.
Tales of the Jedi. Thank you. Tales of the Jedi animation show that'll be coming out down the line here that they announced. So what are you guys' thoughts about apparently a story of younger Ahsoka?
Live action, I think that would be cool if they went into that side. As for animation, either way is cool, I guess.
I'm always up for more Ahsoka stories, as long as they fit into the continuity. I think it would be easy to mess that up, so I'm hoping that they're very mindful of that.
Having a live action kid play a young Ahsoka, you saw a young Princess Leia knock it out of the park. Let's get a little more of that. That would be really cool. But if they're going to do an animation, either way to kind of expand that whole Plo Koon, mentorship would be great.
Yeah, so I mean, this is obviously through comicbook.com. It was actually told by Ashley Eichstein, so that's pretty exciting. Maybe she'll voice it, but because of it being a young Ahsoka, it may not make sense, right? If it doesn't sound right. But obviously, if we get Ashley to reprise the role, that'll be exciting.
What I found interesting in that article, too, is earlier this year, Eichstein told comicbook.com that she would love to potentially have a cameo in the live-action Ahsoka series. If the opportunity came out, she says, it's something I have not been part of, Eckstein explained at the time. I would love to be, but I'm purely a fan at this point. I'm not involved in the live action series. I've not met Rosario Dawson yet. I think that'd be really cool, though. That could be like, I'm going to call that Obi-Wan talk or Ewan McGregor talk, meaning that's what she has to say right now. But how cool if she did come in and maybe played some other character or just did something. That'd be kind of cool.
It'd be meta if she was an Imperial and Ahsoka had a killer.
Oh, wow. That would be meta. But I'd love to see her play another member of the same species.
Ah, yeah.
Grandma cool. Ahsoka?
I mean, not even Jedi,
I like that idea, Nathan. That would be really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, just as a kind of nod, a meta thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be good. I mean, like I said, we all love Ashley. We thank her for her being part of the creation of Ahsoka. So yeah, I think any type of homage. I mean, obviously Rosario Dawson's been a doll towards Ashley on Twitter and anything like that, social media. So has praised her and thanked her for her blessing. Earlier when we were getting the stuff being for talks about Mando season 2. So. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that'd be really cool. But yeah, I mean, more Ahsoka, more into the lore of her because, Nathan, we don't have Scott here. I mean, I know Ahsoka's been in the comics, but did she ever get her own title? Like we've done like Vader or Dr. Aphra? I don't think we ever got her own title.
I don't believe we have.
Just the book.
Yeah, we got the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think she's had a comic title run.
Yeah. So, because to be fair, the book was really good. I mean, it was I got the Audible version of Ashley reading it, and it was basically kind of that in between what we would have gotten considered the end of the final season of Clone Wars now, because that came before it, and then what we got essentially before Rebels, before she became Fulcrum. So so that was really just kind of almost a couple of weeks in the timeline, if you want to consider the story and all that and what it took place. So I definitely think it's long overdue that she gets a comic book, though. I think that would be good. So, all right. And the last bit of news, going back to live action here. So we know that during the recent, pretty much not expected, but, obviously there was some rumors of some things coming to light to basically replace a couple of the shows that got canceled, specifically the Rangers show when Gina Carano left. So we expected Disney to fill that void with some other shows. And we got announced the Skeleton Crew, which was apparently going to star Jude Law. It sounds like it's going to be live action, because when they first announced it, Scott and I weren't
That's
sure
what I
if it
was trying to
gonna be
figure out. I thought it was
animation or not.
animated. Yeah, I thought it was
So-
animated and he might voice something.
That's what we thought, but they're talking it. The rumor here for the news is that it's basically it started filming production.
Wow.
And I don't think you would say that in an animation. I'm not saying you don't, but it just that doesn't come to mind.
They
when they're
began
doing
drawing.
stuff. Yeah. So we started the storyboard
Storyboarding has begun.
and we did the reading of the scripts, right? So and apparently there's another rumor that Millie Bobby Brown is tied to it as well. So I would think that's going to be live action. Everyone knows her from Stranger Things 11. So
Yeah, so I'm imagining that Jude Law might play a character like there's a episode of the Clone Wars, a Test of Strength, I believe it is, where you have several Padawans who get separated from Ahsoka, and there's a protocol droid, an old Republic style protocol droid, or
Astromech.
No, it's not an astromech. It's a style of droid that they call protocol droid in the Old Republic, but they don't call him a protocol droid in that episode. But he helps them build their lightsabers and kind of takes care of them for a little while. So I'm imagining you might have a droid character that Jude Law is playing who's kind of supervising the kids, but not really.
I was kind of seeing that Jude Law was going to play this very handsome and dashing, smuggler type Outer Rim character, and then one of the kids idolizes him and decides to kill him and take over his identity.
That'd be interesting.
I just gave the plot to talented Mr. Ripley.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys have ever watched it or not, but Scott initially, when we were talking that it was going to be animation, we thought he was actually going to play the bad guy. Because he does a phenomenal job. My wife and I, we love it. It's one of our favorite Christmas movies. Is Rise of the Guardians. Have you guys ever watched that?
I remember that movie.
And he plays the bad guy, Pitch, or the Darkness.
Yeah, that's right.
As the voiceover for that. And he just has one of those charismatic voices. He can play very well to an Imperial of some sort. Or if they do an Inquisitor even. But yeah, it's interesting. So, whether it's going to be animation or live action, we still don't know 100%, but the way they're making this sound, to me, it sounds like it's going to be live action. So, but yeah, it definitely sounds like it's taking the Star Trek Prodigy storyline.
Yeah, I could be totally wrong. Maybe Jude Law is an Imperial. He could be the bad guy. Yeah, even if it's not animated.
Either way, I'm excited if it's live action and he's starring in it.
Yeah, it's a different take. That's what I'm excited for. It sounds like it's supposed to be again during quote unquote original trilogy timeline, which is always something that we obviously like. I'm okay again if they wanted to expand it and go beyond that. Whether you wanted to do it in the sequel or a prequel or even outside of that in the Old Republic or their new High Republic or whatever they're calling it. So. They're not pushing too much of that timeline right now, which is really surprising that they haven't done any type of animation for that show yet or that timeline yet. But anyways, otherwise that covers it for the news. And we appreciate that because I know now we're going to be chomping at the bits for Shadows of the Empire. But first, we're going to have Kevin do double duty as always.
All right, here we go. Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville Show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Shadows of the Empire. It is a time of crisis. Han Solo, frozen in carbonite, is being taken to the vile gangster Jabba the Hutt. As Princess Leia mounts a rescue mission including Luke Skywalker, Lando Calrissian, and a brilliant young pilot, Darth Vader pits himself against a cunning and ruthless rival. Xizor is the leader of a powerful crime syndicate who seeks to supplant Vader for favor of their mutual master, the dreaded Emperor. Their target, Luke Skywalker. Suddenly, Luke finds himself the potential prize of the two most evil entities in the galaxy, one who wants him alive and one who wants him dead.
It just brings you right in.
Well, it's interesting too that we've kind of had two different wall crawls, right?
yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, to clarify, that one that Nathan just did, I believe that one is from the video game, and then the one that you read originally was part of the comic book, if I remember correctly. So
correct.
Had to show them both there. So yeah.
Yes. So, but anyways, let's talk a little shop on Shadows of the Empire, because as we've been going through What a Piece of Junk, we've been doing a lot of coverage of the current Disney and Star Wars and everything that's canon, the movies, the shows, and all that stuff. And we like to do a little retro, which has been cool. But technically, that retro stuff that they have on Disney Plus is canon, right? So we did, a bit about droids. We did about the Ewoks, stuff like that. So now we're really starting to branch into the extended universe of the old, which brings us here when this first released, guys. I mean, where were you in 95 or 96 when this got announced? Where were you guys? What were you, were you in high school? Were you in middle school, college? What were you guys doing?
Kevin, I'll let you answer that first.
Okay, so 96. Well, I was 25, 26, because I was born in 70. I'm doing my math correctly. And
Yes.
this, and I'll get into more of the setup a little bit later, but I was ready for this big time, and I was really excited about it.
Nathan?
I had no idea what was going on, because in 1996, I was not a Star Wars fan. I didn't really know what Star Wars was. I really got into Star Wars with the special edition, which kind of makes me the target for Shadows of the Empire, because part of the idea was to build up excitement for the re-release of the original movies and eventually the prequels. But yeah, I didn't know anything about it until quite a bit later. And the way I really got into Shadows of the Empire was through the video game, because I was big into Nintendo and I had the N64, and I would drag my parents out to Blockbuster over on Sharon Amity. It's now Advanced Auto Parts, because Blockbuster, well, there's like 2 of them left. I don't actually know how many, but it's single digits, and certainly not here in Charlotte. But that was my favorite thing to do, was to get them to take me to Blockbuster and rent video games. And I rented this one enough times that my parents eventually said, you know what, you're getting that for Christmas. So I eventually did own it, but I rented it a few times first. It was quite a bit of fun, but I wasn't there for the initial launch of the story.
So this was between my end of middle school and the beginning of high school for me. When this came out, I was in 8th grade, and I obviously was a huge Star Wars fan. At this point, we did have the Star Wars collectible card game. There was obviously, some other expanded universe comic books and novels. We were having Rogue Squadron, all sorts of really cool stuff. And this was we're going to get into, this is a huge multimedia platform push that Lucasfilm was doing. It was something that they, for the most part, we only knew Star Wars from the original movies. That was official Lucasfilm canon. Everything that was done through the extended universe in the late, I don't know, Kevin, was late 80s. Did they have anything, or was it just early 90s when we had the extended universe really start to get traction on different platforms, media?
All right, well, I can set you up for that, because I can kind of paint a timeline here.
All right.
Because I'm going to allude to what a lot of us Star Wars fans call the dark times. Okay, so let me take you back in time. Maybe you don't remember this, so I'm going to remind everyone here of what was happening in the Star Wars timeline in real time here. So, of course, when you go back, you remember the original trilogy, right? And then we got the last of the original trilogy, Return of the Jedi, come out in '83. Then we get some animated properties. We get the droids. We get the Ewoks. We also get the live-action Ewoks movies as well. And the last thing that came out was in '85. It was one of the second Ewok movie that came out. So let me go ahead and then tell you what happened after that. This is where it gets interesting. Okay, first of all, this is where the dark times happen, okay? No new Star Wars from 1986 to 1990. Oh my God, what was happening? Well, I was getting older. I was finding other interests and stuff like that for me personally. But the movies were always there. You'd always get the marathon, maybe during the holidays or something. I remember going to the movies and seeing a one-time showing of the original trilogy. It was done for a local charity. We got to see it, and it was a really bad prints. I want to say maybe late 80s, I think it was. But then the Thrawn trilogy happens. Remember the Thrawn trilogy, guys, right? Right there. This is what pretty much started the roll for Star Wars and got people excited again. Timothy Zahn, Thrawn trilogies from 91 through 93. All right, you guys remember these books here. For me, I didn't read a single page of these. To me, I listened to the audiobooks. First audiobook, if I remember correctly, was done by Anthony Daniels. No, excuse me. I think it was the guy that played Wedge. I think he did the first one, and then Anthony Daniels took over a little bit later. But yes. Then we get into the announcement. Lucas announces the prequel trilogy in 93. Actually, 92. Lucas acknowledged that he had plans to create a prequel trilogy in the Lucasfilm Fan Club magazine, but then he announces this to Variety magazine in late 1993. All right. So we're getting a little excited here. He's working on something. We're not sure when exactly it's coming out, but what does come out or announced. The Star Wars special editions are announced. 1995. George Lucas had announced a special edition of New Hope in 95, but few were aware of it in the mainstream. The moment most people realized Star Wars was returning to the theaters is when they went and saw Star Trek First Contact in November 1996. Then Shadows of the Empire is released. There's the original hardcover book. And by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, guys, this one's actually being shown on YouTube because we're doing a video of it and we're showing all these cool pictures and slides and images of everything that we've been talking about. So you get a nice, cool little visual aid. Make sure you check out the Fan Podcast Network. Check out episode 88 here of What a Piece of Junk. Shadows of the Empire had its origins in a dinner conversation between Bantam Spectra's Lou Aronica and Lucas Books' Lucy Autry Wilson. Aronica suggested that Lucasfilm multiple the licensing deals would make it easier for them to create multimedia project that could tell an overarching story throughout multiple mediums. The company then conceived of a project of being, quote, a movie project, but without a movie. Lucasfilm first intended to set the project between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, but John Knowles, that name sounds familiar, convinced them that the period between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi would be more fertile period for storytelling. After George Lucas approved the concept, Wilson and Howard Rothman wrote a brief outline of the premise. Then in November 1994, licensing representative and Lucasfilm executives met Skywalker Ranch to begin a serious work on the project. Author Steve Perry, who had been hired to write the novel, took detailed notes of the discussion and used this to create an outline for his book. This outline would serve as a basis for all other aspects and overall project. According to Rothman, Lucas originally planned to release the special edition in 96, but the first film of his prequel trilogy, and then the first film of his prequel trilogy in 97 for the 20th anniversary of Star Wars. That was originally when episode 1 was supposed to come out. When plans changed and those projects moved to 97 and 1999 respectively, the company decided that 1996 would be an opportune time to release their multimedia project. The success of this project later served as a model for 2007's Star Wars The Force Unleashed multimedia endeavor. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I dove into this like big time. I was so excited. I was also, I'd gotten a new car, technically a used car, and I got a cassette player in there, and I was listening to the Thrawn trilogy on cassette. And when this thing came
How many
out,
cassette tapes was that?
it was only 2. But here's something you need. Here's something you need to know about 90s audiobooks and all the Star Wars audiobooks. Okay, I got a picture here. Let me just show you how I was doing this here. Hold on. Where is it here? Here we go. Here we go. Star Wars audiobook by Steve Perry, read by Anthony Heald. They were all abridged, unfortunately. So there was like a lot of stuff that was not in this. And I wasn't a book reader. I didn't have the patience for books when I was starting to get older. I was more of a video and audio guy. But I ate up Star Wars audiobooks, and this one here. And by the way, Anthony Heald, he did over, I think, between 30 and 35 Star Wars audiobooks. And he got pretty good at like doing the different voices, but you always got like the sound effects and the Wookiee sound effects and the R2-D2 sound effects. And Anthony Heald was kind of like, he was Mr. Star Wars for me. And he's a director. He's an actor. He's been in lots of movies if you look at his IMDb. But have you guys listened to the audiobook?
Not this one.
No.
No, I'm not big on audiobooks. I feel like I should be, but I've never gotten into them.
Well, it left out a lot of stuff, like a lot of the Boba Fett story of escaping and, getting into fights with other bounty hunters and stuff like that. And some other characters were left out, but Dash Rendar, of course, was in there. But anyway, this right here, this now I can just listen to it digitally. I actually bought it on iTunes and listened to the audiobook. Yeah. So did you get the books then, Derek? Is that how you dove into it?
I got the comic books, was how I originally got into it. And then there was the action figures, right?
Gotcha.
I really wasn't much into, I liked novels, but it was always a struggle. I really got into Star Wars expanded universe through the Rogue Squadron novels. But for Shadows of the Empire, I did not. Like I said, I was still at that ripe age where it was like, eh. So comics was my thing. So yeah, that's what I really what I got into it, and obviously enjoyed that. So
yeah, the comics were great. I think I read them once and then I put them away, and I kind of forgot all of the stuff that it included from the book that the audiobook didn't, because I just kept listening to the audiobook over and over again, and then I forgot like it had missed all this stuff. But was it N64 Shadows of the Empire right there? I would say this one and GoldenEye. We got pictures of this on YouTube here. We're probably like some of the biggest N64 games.
Yes, they were. Yeah, so I didn't have GoldenEye. My cousin did, and he would routinely beat me because he'd always put it on the man with the golden gun, and he knew where the golden gun was. I'd still kill him a few times, but he'd only have to shoot me once, and I'd just die. So I felt like I was better at the game.
Well, this is where I learned, guys, that Dash Rendar, one of the characters in Shadows of the Empire, was at the Battle of Hoth. And you play that video game, and there's scenes inside Hoth, and stuff like that, which was fascinating.
Yeah, so you get to pilot one of the T-47s for a while. Yeah. If you put in a particular cheat code or press the right entries on that Hoth level, you actually get to pilot an AT-ST. I knew all of the tricks back then because I was playing with Power. I was a Nintendo Power subscriber, and they told me all the cheat codes. So I got to do all sorts of things. And there was an official like cheat code thing where you put in codes, kind of like in the new Lego Star Wars game. Where if you put in the right code, you unlock characters. But this did all sorts of weird stuff. My favorite one was one that would add not subtitles, but it looked like subtitles to the credits. Like little things at the bottom that told a story about this Wampa that was pining for the fjords. It was a big riff on the Dead Parrot sketch from Monty Python.
Derek, did you dive deep into the game?
I remember I rented it at Blockbuster or something at the time and played it for the weekend. But to be honest, I didn't care much for it. Honestly, I didn't. I really like the Super Nintendo. And then I really like Dark Forces for the PC.
Dark Forces for the PC, baby. Yeah.
So I was a Dark Forces and Dark Forces 2 for the PC. And like I said, the Super Nintendo had the original, Super Star Wars, Super Empire Strikes Back, and Super Return of the Jedi. And I don't know. I didn't get much into the game for whatever reason. I mean, like I said, I love the comics. I was loving the story. Like I said, I even collected the thing, but I for whatever reason, I just completely didn't care for the style of the game.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I got burned out it kind of quick. It was kind of fun for a while, and then I kind of went to other stuff. But I was all about those PC games and stuff. But what about the toys, guys? I need to talk about the toys here because I got deep into the toys. And I did want to mention something here. Now, I'm showing a picture here of a movie that came out in 1998 called Free Enterprise. It stars William Shatner, and it's about a couple of guys that are big original series Star Trek fans, and they run across William Shatner, who plays I'm going to say, more eccentric version of himself, and decide to do a project with him. And the project's very silly, but it's more about these two guys and what they do. Being a Star Trek fan, Nathan, have you ever seen this movie?
I don't believe I have, actually.
Well,
or if I have, it's been a long time.
I highly recommend any Star Trek fan to see this movie, but also there's some Star Wars references in it, which are very funny. Now, it's very important that this movie came out in 1998. When I started working for Decipher in 1999 and I moved out to Virginia, one of the things that we all did, and I'm sure you guys went out with your friends and you did your Toys R Us or Walmart or Target toy runs to see if they got the new toys in and to kind of see what was going on. There's a very funny scene in this film where they go in there, the Toys R Us, looking to see what new toys are happening. And they come across the Star Wars section, and one of the guys says, well, at least they got the Shadows of the Empire stuff almost out of here. Who's this Xizor guy? You know, and this little kid goes, it's Xizor. And, you know, he kind of does it. And one of the older guys kind of says, Star Wars is good, but man, there's some really good sci-fi out there. You know, have you ever heard of Logan's Run, where they kill you when you're at 30 years old? And it's a very, very funny scene. But I want to say that because this was something that we did at my age at the time, mid 20s. We would go to the toy stores because there was a lot of Shadows of the Empire toys, guys. And right there, we've got the 2-pack there with the comics as well. And then we also got several of the figures there, and they all had this kind of like purpley lightsaber behind. At least it looked purple, with the Shadows of the Empire logo of all the characters that were introduced in different versions of our hero characters. My favorite was Dash Rendar's Outrider. I had that toy. Oh my God, I missed that toy so much. It was just so much fun. And then the swoop bike and the swoop bike rider. Not a huge fan of that. But then we also had the micro machines as well. A bunch of cool stuff there, guys. Did you guys get into the toys?
I was into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles toys
Nice.
in the late 80s and early 90s. But by the time I got into Star Wars, part of the way I got into Star Wars was through the card game.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of took the place of the toys for me. I didn't really get action figures after that. I spent all my money on Decipher cards. So I blame you.
I'll take it.
You're the reason that I did not get toys for Shadows of the Empire.
Derek?
I'm trying to recall, because I have probably like 100 Star Wars toys still sealed in packs, but or box, whatever you want to packaging. But that was from the 96 run, I think, is when they were starting to push those again. It was because it was like that whole like 96 to like 99 was nothing but Star Wars because of the Shadows of the Empire. Then there was the special edition, like you mentioned, in 97. And then obviously we got the Phantom Menace in 99. So it was just like one thing after another. And I'm trying to remember when they really pushed out those Star Wars toys. If it was because I got with the orange background, right? And then they had the green background, like the traditional ones that everyone had from
They had the power. You talking about the non-Shadows of the Empire ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they had the power of the Force, where they were all like, muscly,
Yeah, it was them repushing, right? Because obviously the late 70s and early 80s stuff was you couldn't find that anymore, right? I mean, that was out of stock, and that was a collectible item at that point, even though it was only 10, 15 years later at this point. But yeah, I'm trying to think what did I have, if anything, from Shadows of the Empire for toys. I feel like I had Bosch, Chewbacca, Snuva, and I feel like I had Dash Rendar and maybe Prince Xizor, but I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go back through. But like I said, I have like huge buckets full in my garage. I have to go through them at all.
Yeah, I know I got the Outrider, and I love that toy just because it was kind of like another Corellian freighter, which I thought was a neat design, especially the way the toy kind of opened up. The only thing I didn't like was the cockpit. It kind of opened up, and then Dash would kind of like slide out, like into space. You had to be careful about that. But it was neat the way that it turned. Though it was pretty cool. Did you guys know that there was also a soundtrack? Because when you listen to the audiobook, and then I think it was also incorporated in the video game, there was a soundtrack, and it was done by Joel McNeely. And when you listen to the audiobook, the soundtrack was very much highlighted, and during certain scenes, it would come up, and like the main title theme for Star Wars, of course, and they had Leia's Nightmare, and Xizor's theme had a very interesting thing, and then the seduction of Princess Leia. Did you guys ever listen to the soundtrack?
Yeah, I owned it.
What'd you think of it?
Apparently I did, because I played the video game so much, but I don't really remember it.
Well, I had the CD of it, right? I mean, I know they had both, cassette and CD still then, but I did have the CD. I would play the first Star Wars theme just over and over. I mean, that was just really cool. Then it kind of like it goes really slow, like at the end, like a typical movie, where it kind of like drifts into space, right? And that's right where they're talking about the end of the main theme, still part of soundtrack 1. With Leia's theme there, but it would go into that. And then, I'm just trying to remember if it was the end song that I really overplayed as well. Cause with, CDs, right. You could just skip to whatever track you wanted, right. You didn't have to rewind
the
it.
Destruction of Xizor's palace.
It was either that one or number 6, Xizor's theme. I can't remember, but one of those I really enjoyed as well too. A lot. And then I think Beggar's Canyon Chase was a good one too. Number 4.
I did want to mention real quick was the name Coruscant. Okay. That was introduced in the Thrawn trilogy. And I'm bringing this up because the audiobooks, whenever Coruscant was brought up, it was pronounced Coruscant or Coruscant. And no one really knew how to correctly pronounce it. So the audiobooks took the liberty and said that. And it really wasn't until episode 1 came out. And I think you hear Qui-Gon saying Coruscant for the first time. And then we just kind of stuck with it that way. And keep in mind, too, if you guys remember this, that George Lucas, when he did the prequel trilogy, he decided to incorporate Coruscant in there, even though he never came up with it. So, yeah.
But see, that's interesting because I always, in my head, pronounced it Coruscant. Even reading the Thrawn trilogy, which I did read that before the prequels.
Yeah.
That would have thrown me off if I listened to the audio.
Coruscant.
So Derek, that was the first topic you brought up there was which product platforms when you first introduced. And I may have missed a couple other things, but those were the main things. I mean, they really inundated us with a lot of cool stuff.
Which today is just common stuff whenever they push a big movie now, right? Or
I mean, this was a big deal. I mean, we were getting excited for the new movies that were going to be coming out. We were getting excited for the re-release of Star Wars on the big screen. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was coming back. We had the audiobooks and the books. I mean, it was like Star Wars is back, baby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was huge because, like you said, I mean, they had everything pushing it, right? I mean, it was just on every platform. So,
yeah.
But I mean, we obviously told which platform we went into. So, but let's jump into the guys for our topic questions here. So, who here, we'll start with you, Nathan. Who was your favorite new character that got introduced in this series?
That's a tough question. So I would say not Dash Rendar, because I saw him as just kind of a knockoff Han Solo. In fact, I was a little surprised to find out that they originally thought to do this between episodes 4 and 5 and switched it to between 5 and 6, because it really felt to me like they wanted to write a Han Solo story and then realized, oh, wait, no, Han's in Carbonite. I can't use him. So not Dash, but I did really like Lebo. For some reason, you never got to play as him in the video game, but he was in a lot of the cutscenes. So I liked him from that. I'm going to kind of cheat here. I'm going to say IG-88. He's not from Shadows of the Empire specifically, but that's really where I learned about IG-88, because he was a really, really tough boss in that game.
He was. He was like one of the toughest levels, I think.
Oh, yeah, because you had to run along this train to get to the station. And once you got to the station, he had this like 360 view. You try to sneak up behind him, but it doesn't matter because he can shoot behind him. Really, really tough. And that gave me a lot of respect for IG-88 and just how tough of a bounty hunter he was. Now, of course, he was in Empire Strikes Back, but until I got to the Shadows of the Empire video game and managed to get that card in the card game, I didn't really know who he was from Empire Strikes Back. You see him only for a few seconds. So in a sense, IG-88 was my favorite character from Shadows of the Empire, just because of how tough he was as a boss.
All right. Kevin, who was your favorite new character?
Oh, man. I'm going to be the Dash apologist here because I like the fact that we do get another smuggler guy. Yes, he got a lot of crap for being a Han Solo knockoff, but at least when I would listen to the book and then when I also would look at the comics, there's a certain, he's got a certain little different kind of swagger to him that I liked. And the fact that too, when he really regretted when he thought that he was able to save those people from the missile, the ship that destroyed, he really felt guilty about it. And I kind of like that story arc. But I also like Xizor was great because I like the fact that we had someone that could challenge Vader for power because of all the resources that he had with Black Sun, thus also getting our origin of Black Sun as well. And first real announcement of it. And now Black Sun is canon again. I like the fact too that he was playing, Vader against the Emperor and getting in the Emperor's good gracious, so to speak. I thought that was kind of cool too. But there's certain parts about him that got a little creepy, and we'll get into that a little bit later. What about you, Derek?
Actually, I mean, for me, it was Dash, right? As a kid, I wasn't the biggest Han Solo fan. I was Luke Skywalker all the way. And so when we got kind of a new Han or a different version of him, I did like Dash. I thought he was really good. Xizor, I think he was a knockoff of a Thrawn, to be honest. But I mean, I still liked him.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I felt like he was like a cheaper version of Thrawn. But obviously, it's definitely to have somebody that you wanted to feel that was a overarching, villain that wasn't just the Emperor or Vader. You had to have somebody at that caliber, right? So, but really overall though, I just, I thought it was great, but, I really, just overall, I mean, it's kind of like what Nathan said. It's just, you got all the bounty hunters at least this time, right? Besides Boba Fett. Because they were all introduced and they were actually doing something this time rather than just standing in the executor, getting, lecture from Vader. So, but yeah, definitely I would say Dash was probably my favorite. And I actually thought it was a really cool ship. It was kind of a mix between a, Millennium Falcon, Corellian freighter / B-Wing, right?
Yeah.
They're kind of
ships, exactly.
Right? So I thought that was pretty cool.
That's a good comparison. So I didn't see anyone throw their hand out for Renga Jixton or Gizman. Renga
I don't
Jixton.
remember them at all. I'm not even sure they were in the video game.
No, I don't think so. But the comic books were, and I can't say if they were in the audio or in the actual book itself. I'm going to say probably yes. But Renga worked for Vader, and Vader sends him to Tatooine to get into the swoop bike gangs. Because he knows that Luke's going to try to go to Tatooine to hopefully rescue Han from Jabba. And Gizman is the leader of the swoop bike gangs. So just had to give a shout out to those guys.
Well, and it's really how you get the tie with Jabba the Hutt, right? I mean, that whole point of it, because honestly, if you look at then what we got in the special edition, we were supposed to get Jabba in A New Hope. Obviously, that didn't happen. So, and obviously the Hutts are big crime lords and, obviously the expanded universe, even then, what we got in the stories there besides what we got in the movies. So it was really interesting to see that. And I mean, Jix was actually he was a cool character too, because his whole storyline of like trying to play the like quadruple agent, I felt like, because he was there sent by Vader, then he joins Jabba's gang, then he has to protect Luke Skywalker, but then he has to, all this different stuff. And it was just back and forth. And miraculously, he didn't get himself killed. So
yeah, and Vader orders him to protect Luke from everyone else. Because Vader doesn't want him dead, Xizor does, and so it's interesting. He's very dashing. least according to the picture here. So yeah.
Yes. So yeah, in the comics, it looks a little bit more scraggly than that, but yeah, definitely, like I said, an interesting character, because that was the thing that, as most Star Wars movies, we have like 6 storylines going on at the same time, right? So because you have, obviously what's happening between, like we said, our main 3 villains for once, right? Which you got all that. So you had between Pal, Vader, and Xizor. So they got that interaction storyline. You got the whole Boba Fett storyline going on. So that's 2. Then you have Princess Leia with Chewbacca. And originally you had Lando, but then not Lando. Then you had the whole Luke Skywalker. And then you had Lando and Dash. So, I mean, it was just all over, just boom, boom. So I don't think it would have all fit into one movie, to be fair. I mean, that was definitely, if they were going to do something, it would have to be a 2-parter, but a lot going on there. But like I said, it did make it for really good reading. So
yeah.
So speaking of that, so we talked a little bit about characters. So we kind of alluded different scenes. What was your favorite moment within the series, guys? And if it, obviously, as Nathan pointed out, some things didn't happen in certain media platforms. So it'll be interesting to see, what Nathan brings, because obviously he's going to talk about his experience through the video game. You're going to talk about the Audible, most likely version there, Kevin, and I'll probably most likely talk about the comics, even though we might have been exposed to those platforms. So which this time we'll go Kevin first. Which one was your favorite moment in the series?
Towards the end, where you have them going through the sewers to try to get up into the heavily fortified Xizor building, I guess, there in Coruscant, and going through all that stuff. And this is really where you start seeing Luke really learn how to use his lightsaber, especially with his standoff with Xizor and deflecting laser bolts and stuff like this. And this is important because, the whole thing too with using the thermal detonators to threaten in that standoff. And then, I think it's Lando, at least in the audiobook, where he drops one down into the shaft or whatever to destroy everything. But Luke is holding one in the standoff in a dead man's position, I guess. And this is important to see Luke go through all of this because he builds his lightsaber in this, and we want to see how he got from Empire Strikes Back, Luke, basically defeated, to now I'm a Jedi and a badass and I'm walking into Jabba's palace. And I love that this kind of bridges that. And I'm sorry, but seeing the droids pilot the Falcon or hearing about it too, hilarious. I love all of that going up there and stuff like that. So yeah,
they're always yelling at poor 3PO.
Yeah.
So Nathan, what was your favorite moment? And obviously, we don't want you to repeat the same thing that IG-88 was giving you headaches when you finally beat him.
Well, you see, IG-88 was good. No, I'm joking. No, but my favorite moment, this is definitely a video game thing, because there were a few different difficulty settings that you could put the game on. And when you beat the game in the easiest mode, it seems as though Dash and Lebo die at the end when you blow up the skyhook. But if you complete the game at harder levels, like the Jedi level, then you find out they actually went to hyperspeed before the thing blew up and escaped. But you only get that ending if you play on the more difficult settings. So, of course, I started on the easy settings because, I was in middle school. I wasn't all that great at video games, but I worked my way up to the harder settings. And I got that reward of being able to see, no, they did actually escape. And they talked about being able to be seen as martyrs, but without actually having died. So I thought that was really cool to get those alternate endings.
Very cool. So mine is going to be the whole Boba Fett story portion of this. And this is, again, what us of those and that grew up in the 90s, following Star Wars, that we did, doing the comics, doing the extended universe. and why some of us were so upset with the Boba Fett series in certain parts. I'm not saying I disliked it or, but obviously there was quite a few people that were really pissed off, right? Or the way they did it. And I know some people, even some of our fellow, guests that we've had on the show will say, well, yeah, Boba Fett never does anything, right? He's just, which, yes, by movie canon, you're absolutely right. Even by Star Wars, Clone Wars canon and anything else. Yes, I totally get that. But what you see in here, for example, in the comics, it is just awesome. I mean, this is why he is revered as the most, if not, one of the most deadliest bounty hunters of all time. The fact that he takes on 6, quote unquote, I think 5, maybe 5, but 6. Yeah. Cause you got the bat guy, I forget his name too. That lives like 2 seconds in there. The whole bounty hunters takes on that whole regime of all these others that were hired by Vader. And he's got to go through basically, all the sidebar conversations he has with Han Solo, frozen in carbonite, and all the things he has to do, and almost loses Slave One. And, he takes out all these prestige bounty hunters. Yeah, that right there is that cover is fantastic. That to me is what makes Boba Fett so great. And that's to me canon, right? Because that's what I'm used to seeing. And, that's why I felt like I get it. Yeah, he was sitting in the Sarlacc, blah, 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 and he's older, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah. But at the end of the day, that is what makes Boba Fett great. And that's why
What's important to know is all of this was canon at the time. Correct. All of it. There wasn't going, the comics don't count. Everything that came out was canon. And like these comics, and when you started describing, and this kind of got me, when I read the comics later, I'm like, oh, this wasn't in the audiobook. He kicks ass in the comics, and it's drawn really, really well. And he
just straight up murders them. He doesn't. He straight up murders them.
Yeah, and the battle with IG-88, and him having to go to Gaul to get repairs because he knew he was going to be tracked to Tatooine, and not to get sidetracked, by the way, but the comic issue number 2 actually has a Decipher ad in it for the Toys R Us 2-player game, and it says, "The galaxy's greatest card game now at Toys R Us. Deal with it." But you're right, dude. He was a badass in this comic series. Fantastic.
So that was my favorite moment. So, All right. Good stuff, guys. Okay. So let's now talk the overall story itself, Shadows of the Empire. Do you guys feel that the series was successful in what it was supposed to do and better connecting and answering what happened between episodes 5 and 6? Or for some of us, I mean, possibly if you didn't get quite the whole story, do you felt like it just created more questions because now it kind of introduced all these other characters that weren't initially in episode 5 and don't show up in episode 6? So, so what do you guys feel like? So this time we'll start off with Nathan. What do you feel for how overall the Shadows of the Empire connected within the Star Wars universe?
For me, it kind of felt unnecessary. I didn't really have questions as to what happened between 5 and 6. I thought Boba Fett just flew from Cloud City to Tatooine and hung out at Jabba's palace for a while. So in a way, it was answering questions that I never asked and never felt needed to be asked. Now, did it break things? Well, there's one thing I felt like it broke, but for the most part, it was okay. But I didn't really find it necessary.
Okay.
But I'm guessing Kevin might have a bit different of a take. So take it away, Kevin.
Yeah, I do. To me, this fit right in. A nice, comfortable pair of shoes. Like I said, I was listening to the audiobooks, and they had also released the original. It's on CD and cassette tape. You can get the radio dramas, the Star Wars radio dramas, and Shadows of the Empire came out in 1996. Something else also came out in 1996 that I wanted to bring up here, guys, and that was the Return of the Jedi radio drama. It took forever for them to finally do this, because the original radio drama came out in 81, and then Empire Strikes Back came out, I think, the next year after that. And Mark Hamill reprised his role as his character in the first two, and so did Anthony Daniels, C-3PO. But they got a different actor. I think it was Joshua Farden that did the voice for Luke in Return of the Jedi audio drama. And I remember getting this when it first came out, and for years I would listen to the audio drama in order, except between Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, I would listen to the audiobook for Shadows of the Empire. And to me, it all flowed together. And I loved having that that extra story that they told. And I thought it was absolutely necessary, because knowing what happened at the end of Empire Strikes Back, and then all of a sudden Luke and the droids showing up at Jabba's palace, what happened? Now we know. And they did a great job of connecting all of that together. And one thing I did want to mention too is that people were working together at Lucasfilm at this time to make sure that Return of the Jedi audio drama book tied to Shadows of the Empire. And they did that by mentioning when Han Solo got rescued, and they're back in the Falcon, and they're leaving Tatooine, and they're safe, and they're heading to the Rebels meeting, or I guess rendezvous point. There's a funny little scene inside of the cockpit where Han makes reference to Leia's slave Leia outfit. Like, is she going to keep it? But he also mentions, Luke, what is this I hear about the droids flying the Falcon in Coruscant? And so that goes straight into Shadows of the Empire. So there was all this connective tissue back then. And I'm showing a picture of the R2 and 3PO Star Wars CCG card. That is why that was done, because of that particular scene in Shadows of the Empire. So that's how I feel about it. What about you, Derek?
So it's one of those things where I wasn't clamoring for it, but I'm with you. Once you knew it and you read it and you saw it, you're like, yeah, I don't think I could ever unsee it, right? Because it flowed so well. It made sense. It fit right into it. And it's like, okay, when are we getting a movie of this? Mm-hmm. But overall, though, it's one of those things where, like you mentioned it, like, we get the end of The Empire Strikes Back, which, again, for me is my favorite, right? Where the Alliance gets their butt kicked. You know, Luke gets his hand cut off. Han Solo is frozen in carbonite. You got all this stuff. And then when you get into Return of the Jedi, I mean, we understood it. There was always these time gaps in between the Star Wars movies that, you know, and then we got the wall crawls, and it kind of tells us. But it wasn't enough in the wall crawls to kind of link everything together, because it's like, okay, you know, like you said, Luke Skywalker constructs a whole new lightsaber. And as we've gotten more of that through time, of understanding kyber crystals and how that comes to be in actual canon, you know, it's not like it's something that Luke could just go out and just buy at the, you know, coffee store, right? He actually had to go out and make it, right? And get those things. He lost his hand, and the fact that he has to now you know, deal with that. And it seems like, oh, great, he's just a master in it as soon as he gets at Return of the Jedi. You mentioned it briefly, but there is a point within the comics too where he does mind control. He's starting to do that, right? When he's captured, and you have to use he has to learn it. And it's kind of a funny scene, right? Because the guy thinks he's talking to him, and he's just really trying to get him to open up the locked door. So you kind of see that, right? Because then when he jumps into Return of the Jedi, he's like almost a master at it already, right? So it's just those few things. Also, Lando and getting a bit more of him, but then how he ends up being on Jabba's palace, right? All makes sense, because you see them as Snuva and Bush, and like getting like all these impersonations of other bounty hunters or other smugglers, and that's how they're able to do this stuff, right? So it really helps enhance the next part of that story. Again, did I need it initially? No, because if they would have never done anything with it, technically by canon standards, we don't know. But once you get it, and I think it was done so well, I think it did do its job, and it really, really helped tie in between 5 and 6. And again, it really filled in that Boba Fett portion to me, right? And it really brought that to say, okay, this is a really cool character.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yep.
So, all right. Okay, so the next question we have here is, okay, so you guys feel like we should have Shadows of the Empire be canon? Does it break canon? Obviously, really, let's just talk about if they were to introduce, or maybe in a sense reintroduce, but introduce Shadows of the Empire into current Star Wars timeline or canon, because I don't want to say current timeline, just to say canon. You know, how do you think they should do that, guys? Kevin, let's start with you.
Well, first of all, for me, it's already headcanon. I don't care what other stuff says. I'm just going to say it's headcanon for me. But it does there is some canon issues, though, that they do that. And, you know, when you look back, you see the reasons why Lucasfilm decided to, you know, wipe the slate clean and just call it Legends and give them the empty palette to basically retell Star Wars stories in certain parts and stuff like that. But yes, I would if I could, because not so much has changed. And I know that like a lot, I think there's the Darth Vader comic books take place around the same time. So it'd be stepping over that. I've stopped reading those, so those aren't my headcanon, you know? So I like it for that reason. I think that a lot of the stuff that it introduced and certain people not being around anymore in characters, I think it's a nice little thing to still kind of feel like it is part of the family. But I got something I'll mention of why it's probably not going to be happening ever.
All right, Nathan.
So I think they have, in fact, already started doing this. I think they should take bits and pieces of it and make those canon, but not take the whole thing wholesale. And what I mean by that is we have Falit. We see them in the Clone Wars. We saw one in Obi-Wan live action for the first time, to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah, it was trying to capture small Leia.
Correct, yes. So there's bits and pieces. And the Black Sun is canon. That originated in Shadows of the Empire. I think they could take a few more things. I think Xizor himself could be canon. Guri could be canon. But I think the overall story probably should not be canon. The one thing that really irked me the most, and this irked me even back in the day playing the video game, there's a level where you help steal the second Death Star plans. And I felt like that really cheapened the whole mini Bothans died to bring us this information. Like, yeah, okay, mini Bothans died, but really Dash Rendar brought us this information. But, you know, we won't mention him. So I didn't really like that particular aspect of the story, and I'd be fine with that never being canon.
To be fair, though, at least in the comics, they talk about that, and that is the whole plan by Prince Xizor to Palp on why to do it. Because they want to basically have the rebels think that the Death Star is not. So it really actually does connect it. So maybe in the
it's used as bait,
it doesn't
right?
connect it. But yeah, because that's the whole point of how they're trying to get Luke Skywalker to basically go to Coruscant and that whole action scene. Plus, then it also tells them, oh, hey, they can't pass up this information because there's this rumor of another Death Star and all these plans. And basically that is a trap that they mentioned in that for the whole point.
But what about the Bothans?
No, the Bothans are in there too. The Bothans are part of the comic, and they do die.
Well, at least in the video game, they are mentioned, and there's like a ship that just kind of blows up.
Yeah, I think there were some Bothans on that ship that were indirectly killed that Dash thought that he could try and save, and he couldn't, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah. But
that was added on to the death toll when Mothma was
the good thing I was going to say, you can get the comics, the PDF free online. Just Google it and do it, and then you can get some of those cool things that you might have missed, like I said, because all the different platforms had different things that they left out.
It still felt it felt to me like they were overlaying this whole story of how they got the second Death Star plans, and then kind of paying lip service to what was actually in the movie, and just kind of saying, "Oh, right, we need to make sure that a bunch of Bothans die so that we can technically still be within canon." What if we just made a ship full of Bothans and blew it up? It'll be great.
Well,
no, I like
you can almost say that they took a small piece of this, and it's part of Rogue One as well, right? I mean, how they do with the original Death Star, right? Yeah. So overall, I'm with you, Nathan, that I think that they've already been doing it, but I think they should continue to pull certain elements that are really good. I would love to see a Dash Rendar character. I was almost the point where, obviously, we don't know what they're going to do with Rogue Squadron, but if they weren't going to tie it into actual Rogue Squadron of what we know in Legends canon with Wedge Antilles, and they're going to do it in sequel era, that's when they should introduce Dash Rendar then. Because then at least it ties something of the old Legends or old headcanon for us and ties it into the sequel, and that will get me on board even more, right? To me, that's what they should do. Xizor, yes, a phenomenal character. I think they should almost go backwards, like what they've done with Thrawn. When Zahn first wrote him, he was a prequel character. Now he's a sequel character, soon to be prequel because of time jump and everything. But he's kind of doing both here. But if Xizor's kind of sequel / in between, then bring him into the prequels, right? Maybe but it would be really cool with, like we talked about, with the whole Black Sun and being that in Mando and Boba Fett, he should make a prize in Boba Fett season 2 if we get a book of Boba Fett season 2. That would be really cool to tie something in there, right? And you get Guri, because imagine getting Android Guri versus Black Chrysanthemum. That would be a cool duel, right?
Yeah. Speaking of Black Chrysanthemum, one character, and I hate to speak against the Wookiees here, but I think Snuva should not be canon, because whatever Snuva did, Black Chrysanthemum can do.
I like that.
And that's probably fair, but or we get Black Chrysanthemum versus Snuva, because we can't get that.
I kind of want to see the haircut, and I want to see the chop top Wookiee. I really want to see that.
Almost looks like a mullet.
Yeah, it's a Wookiee mullet. I love it.
So
now that's a lethal mullet. Speaking of the lethal mullet.
Well said.
So, but to me, that would make perfect sense, right? You could get Snuva, you could get Guri, you could get Xizor, all that in the Book of Boba. That would be cool, right? And obviously we got Cad Bane, as even though his Clone Wars had nothing to do with Shadows of the Empire, we've gotten that lead up. So there could be all these old bounty hunters showing up, right? And we could still get that where Boba Fett does have his Shadows of the Empire moment where he kills Bosk and Zuckuss and Forlom and all that stuff, right? So I feel like there's bits out there they could really take and just keep us in there, and it would be real nice for Favreau and Filoni to do that for us. That really felt Shadows of the Empire, to be fair, outside of Zahn and what he did with the Thrawn series and stuff and Higher to the Empire, it really put Star Wars on the map, because that's actually what got me back into like knowing Star Wars had other stuff out there, was with the Shadows of the Empire. I didn't know. I went back afterwards and then did, the Zahn. I did, everything else. Like I said,
oh, that's
Rogue
cool.
Squadron,
So Shadows brought you in, and then you found out about the other stuff. That's cool.
Yeah. Like I said, I love Star Wars to begin with, so I knew the original. Like I said, playing the card game already at that point. But the fact that they were releasing new content that wasn't just a rehash of with special edition and stuff like that, right? So Shadows, I mean, I knew a little bit of the comics, but I always thought it was just, whatever they made up from the original. So
I had a couple other things I wanted to bring up. First of all, I didn't want to forget about this book that we have here called The Secrets of Shadows of the Empire, that also came out the same year as the book. And this was reference book written by Mark Coda Vaz, structured like a making of book, typically written for a film. The book covers the Shadows of the Empire multimedia campaign. It explains the origins and development of the novels, comics, video games, and the soundtrack. Star Wars Secrets of the Shadows of the Empire provided the official guide to the heroes, the villains, and all the major combatants. When the war is over, only one will control the Empire's violent underworld. That was the press release for it. This had a bunch of like pictures and stuff like that. So we always like these compendium books that come out to support our favorite stuff, and that definitely came out. But there was a couple other things too I wanted to let you guys know about. Did you guys know there was a sequel? Yeah, Star Wars Shadow of the Empire Evolution. This one here says, let me get this real quick here. Shadows of the Empire Evolution was a sequel to the original story by the author of the Shadows of the Empire, Steve Perry. This series was the first foray into comics by the best-selling Perry. The story is set in 4 years ABY, which sets 1 year after Empire Strikes Back, and more or less shortly after the events of Return of the Jedi. Xizor, the leader of Black Sun, has been killed by Darth Vader, and Guri, a beautiful human replica droid and Xizor's personal assassin, is left wondering what her future will hold now that she no longer has anyone to answer to. Oh, she sounds lonely. Anyone want to help her out there?
Sounds like femme fatale.
No, thank you.
Now, when we were talking about canon, guys, I did want to mention this article that I found, because I found it kind of interesting. I'm usually not a big fan of Screen Rant, but this article that was published kind of recently, 2020, by Thomas Bacon in November said, Star Wars Shadows of the Empire isn't part of Disney canon. Shadows of the Empire is one of the most popular Star Wars stories outside of the movies, but there's a few reasons why it will never be Disney canon. And he goes on to say, Shadows of the Empire may be popular, but the simple truth is that it will never be considered part of Disney canon. That does not mean it shouldn't be forgotten, though. Lucasfilm upcoming High Republic Transmedia initiative builds on a foundation laid by Shadows of the Empire, albeit taking the idea of a shared narrative that crosses between different mediums to the next level. Meanwhile, Black Sun is still part of canon. Dash Rendar has been subtly referenced, and even Xizor has gotten some vague allusions, but it's very doubtful they'll all come together for a similar story in modern canon. And some of the points that he brought out was that was kind of interesting was that what is it here? Shadows of the Empire creates some canon problems. That's obvious. Okay, we talked about that. Shadows of the Empire is polarizing. It doesn't help that Shadows of the Empire is quite dated. It successfully captured the artistic spirit of the 90s comics and science fiction, most notably Dash Rendar, who is basically what Han Solo would look like if he was created by Rob Liefeld. I thought that was pretty funny. So they talk about dated, but one of the most important things that probably they want to bury is the Shadows of the Empire Leia plot is problematic. Especially when Xizor moves in on her, it gets pretty creepy, and basically makes Xizor a sexual predator. So,
but to be fair, so is Jabba.
So is Jabba, and Xizor is a bad guy.
But Xizor with his pheromones, it's supposed to attract the opposite, sex. Depending on whatever, it gets a little creepy there.
But wasn't there a movie that did that anyways? I can't remember. I feel like there's a movie out there that did that.
Star
Wars?
No. There's a sci-fi movie out there somewhere.
Probably, Star Trek has done that with Orions since the dawn of time.
There you go. So
yeah,
maybe that's where I'm thinking. So,
but I thought I'd bring that up because it did. The article does raise some interesting questions.
But I will say this though. The one main reason they never made it into a movie was because our actors were 20 years older at the time, right? So it wouldn't look good. But today's deep fakes, they can get away with it. Now, I'm not saying they're going to do everything with that, but if they really wanted to link something between episode 5 and 6, they could still do it.
I had one.
They could do animated.
Oh, yeah.
They do that too.
Yeah, gosh.
Technically, that's what we get with Clone Wars.
I did throw in a last question, Derek. If there was any other Shadows Empire thoughts or discussion, I just wanted to bring up some notes here. Obviously, we got Luke building his lightsaber, and we've seen that cut scene that was never put in Return of the Jedi. That's in one of the special features of that Blu-ray set that they put out there. So that's kind of cool to see. And so, like we touched about, that Luke hones his Jedi skills that show up in Return of the Jedi. Xizor, over 100 years old. Let me ask you guys, Guri, worth 9 million credits?
Not really.
Okay, I'm going to go with no, because Xizor ends up dead. So...
Well, not just that. I mean,
if you're going to have a bodyguard, they need to keep you alive.
Anyway, kind of cute. Just want to mention that. I thought the one thing that this Shadows of the Empire toys was missing was like a play set of some sort. Whether it was like on a Xizor ship or Tatooine or something, or they missed out on the sewage play set. That would have been kind of cool.
Yeah, they could have had Xizor's palace or something like that.
Yes.
That would have been.
But there's something that happens in this book that I find interesting, and it's something that I notice from Empire Strikes Back to Return of the Jedi, that we are learning now through comics and stuff like that, that the scene in Empire Strikes Back that is referenced in the book when it's the conversation, the hologram conversation that Vader's having with the Emperor about Luke Skywalker. And how Vader's suggestion, what if you were turned to the dark side? And Emperor likes that. And then Xizor is apparently in the same room or nearby when the Emperor is having this conversation, so he knows what's going on. But what's interesting about this, though, is that now in current Star Wars canon, we're led to believe that this is when Vader's starting his plot against the Emperor to get his son to join him and turn over the Emperor. Okay, or turn against the Empire, right? But what I also noticed too here is this is where Vader I don't know if you want to call it empathy, but in Empire Strikes Back, he's choking people out left and right? We don't see him do that in Return of the Jedi. We see him let Piet live, right? But there's a scene where Luke was captured, he escapes, and they have a prisoner down on this planet, and he's getting information from the prisoner. And this is where he links that it's Xizor that wants Luke dead. There's two different bounties here on him, right? I think he could kill this guy, because in the audiobook, he says, bring me your highest ranking prisoner. And this guy comes up. And he doesn't kill him. And one of the Imperial officer says, what do you want to do with this guy? Nothing. He's nobody. So we're starting to kind of see this not lighter side of Vader, but him maybe questioning things. He's not as like, I'm going to kill everyone in the sight. So you kind of start to see Vader. Yeah. And then you see the scene, when on Endor, when Luke gives himself up, there's something kind of going on there, but we kind of see a less, I'm going to kill everyone with my anger type of thing. And the seeds are laid in this Shadows of the Empire as well. So I kind of like that. I just want to mention that. So yeah,
that's an interesting arc there, because there is a cut scene from Return of the Jedi where Vader does try to kill Moff Jerjerrod, because Jerjerrod tells him, you can't go in to see the Emperor, and Vader starts to kill him, basically. But Jerjerrod manages to squeeze out through his collapsing windpipe there that this is the Emperor's order, that you cannot go up there. And when he does that, Vader's like, oh, never mind. I will not kill you because you're following the Emperor's order. So that brings up a question of how canon is that cut scene? I guess not at all. Just an interesting thought.
There's certain cut scenes that are like, I wish that was in, and then I'm glad it wasn't. Like when the Jedi lady with the tentacles gets run through by Grievous.
That was one of her four deaths. Yes.
I'm glad they left that out, because it would be nice to know maybe she's still alive. So I don't know. But anyway, that was just some thoughts I had for the last question. Do you guys have any other Shadows of the Empire thoughts?
Obviously, like I said, it to me. I mean, you mentioned it there with Wedge, but I mean, just the whole Rogue Squadron, right? I mean, that was
Good
obviously
old
big
Wedge,
stuff.
baby.
Yeah, and saving Luke and everyone's butts a couple of times. So, and yeah, just overall, just again, Rogue Squadron was the top Maverick squadron at the time. So
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because then you see the position that Wedge has in Return of the Jedi, and it builds up to that.
Yeah,
What about
because
you, Nathan?
it's weird because Wedge's Red 2 in A New Hope, then he's Rogue 3 in Empire Strikes Back, and then he's Red Leader. Like, I'm not to say that flying a T-47 is the same as an X-wing, right? But he's kind of like demoted and then gets re-promoted. So.
Nathan, do you have any thoughts on Shadows of the Empire before we close out?
Nope, just make sure that you look up all the cheat codes for the video game if you go to play it. But there's one that you have to be very careful of because there is a certain code you can put in that wipes all your data on the game.
Uh-oh. By the way, real quick, I'm fascinated that you got into this because of the video game, because you're not alone. There's a lot of people that discovered that video game, and that's how they got into it. I thought that's cool.
And that video game actually then got me into the Rogue Squadron video games, which I just absolutely adored those. One of my favorite moments from those, I was at a friend's house and playing his version of Rogue Squadron, and I knew where all the enemies came in from by this point in time. Yeah. And I shot off into space. He's like, "You're not going to hit anything." I'm like, "Don't worry. It's going to kill that TIE fighter when it spawns in." And sure enough, several seconds later, boom, in the distance. He's like, "How did you do that?" Like, I've played this game a lot.
Awesome.
Nice. All right. So at this point, let's do my favorite segment of the What a Piece of Junk here is what T-shirts are we wearing? So Kevin, as being the guest, but also kind of been, directing everything today and helping us out with the StreamYard. What shirt are you wearing for today?
Oh, I discovered $6 T-shirts. And they have some in a little more than $6, like around $10, and they're just kind of like simple patterns and colors. But I found this support family moisture farms. I thought this was really funny, and it shows like the little round bubble hovel, and then of course the moisture evaporator, and got to support the family moisture farm. So there you go.
Did you own a Shadows of the Empire shirt at some point and just didn't make it over all these years, or no?
No, I don't think I did. I don't remember seeing one. If I did, I probably would have scooped it up. So yeah.
All right, Nathan, how about yourself?
All right. Well, I didn't mention him as my favorite character because he's not really in the video game. But in honor of Snuva, I am wearing my Wookiee of the Year T-shirt. And nice. You know that Snuva would be into eating all these porgs. He would have no compunction there. I don't care.
So what you're saying is the porgs wouldn't give him a guilt trip, like porg.
They give him a guilt trip, but he'd be like, "So you're saying you want to be next?" And
all right. And so my shirt here, it's obviously I've worn this before, but there is some linkage.
Nice and easy.
With the Razor Crest, nice and easy. So obviously in Shadows of the Empire, we have a similar situation, right? A fellow Mandalorian ship is on the verge of being destroyed, right? So in this one, obviously it's Boba Fett as he's carrying frozen in carbonite Han Solo, and he's having to take damage from IG-88 and then having to play tricks against Bosk and Forlom and Zuckuss and all them as they're trying to come in and steal his prize bounty for themselves. So obviously, like I said, luckily Slave One does not get blown up, RIP Razor Crest, but it does take quite a bit of heavy damage.
Nice.
So speaking of T-shirts, you can get some really cool swag of What a Piece of Junk at the TeePublic store. Obviously, you just head on to tpublic.com, search for user/fandom podcast network. You can find all the cool stuff that, Kevin talked a little bit earlier in the promo. All those shirts are available, so head on over there. Nathan, why don't you tell the listeners where they can find us and talking about those reviews?
Well, there's lots of places you can find us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play. Pretty much anywhere that you can find a podcast, you can find us. You can also find us on Facebook, the What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast Facebook page. Derek runs that. The email is whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. Scott's not here today, but he does monitor that inbox, so he can respond to your emails or let us know what's going on. You can also reach us on Twitter at WhatWars or Instagram on Fandom Podcast Network. And of course, we'd love for you to leave us an Apple Podcast review, preferably a 5-star one, but it doesn't have to be. Let us know how we're doing, how we can better serve you. And, we really want to get out of the shadows of the Empire. So those 5-star reviews can help other people find our podcast and join in on the fun.
All right, good deal. Well, the listeners know where to find Nathan and myself, but we do have Kevin as our guest today. So, Kevin, why don't you tell the listeners where they can find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Spartan_Phoenix. And, of course, on Facebook there. I'm in the What a Piece of Junk Facebook group as well. And also on Facebook as well under Kevin Reitzel.
All right, good deal. Well, we just want to thank all of our listeners for listening to this episode. Remember to find us on social media. Hit us up with your thoughts, reviews, comments, suggestions. Again, we do this for the fun of it. We're really excited. We're going to have a short break here, and then we'll be, jumping into the Star Wars Summer Vacation Lego special that'll be coming out early August. And then after that, at the end of August, we're going to have Andor. So that's going to be really exciting as we get back into the streaming service shows. So, and I'm sure Kevin will want to come talk to us about Andor and his thoughts. So, so again, hit us up on the Facebook.
By the way, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on this show. This, like I said, this Shadows of the Empire hits a sweet nostalgia spot for me. Yep. So thank you so much.
Hey, no problem. Yeah, we really appreciate that. So again, out there, do whatever you can to help us to make this podcast more enjoyable. Always remember to respect each other's fandom. From Derek, Nathan, myself, yes, thank you, Kevin, for helping write the Drunken Gungan 2 as Scott's been out. So we appreciate the producer background as well as we're directing this audio and visual because Kevin.
Yeah, check it out on YouTube. Check it out on YouTube. Get to see all the cool stuff we put up,
So, make sure you hit that subscribe button and you'll always get the pings, whether it's our show or any of the other great Fandom Podcast Network shows. But I get to say it this time, respect each other's fandom. Nathan, punch it.